Support for the Dice Tower comes from listeners like you, and from TheOp, also known as USAopoly, and from GameNerds.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 734.
Games that we should have played, but we haven't.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, we have some good old-fashioned board game carnage with a new Tale of Boardgaming Horror. Geoff tries to scare us, we answer questions from the mailbag, and we fess up to our top 10 games that we should play, but haven't. I'm Eric Summerer, and joining me now, the Citizen Kane of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
You know, there's probably some reference here that if I had ever watched this movie, I might know.
Well, I've never watched it either, which is my point, is that it's, you know, Citizen Kane is often considered the pinnacle of cinema, and I haven't watched it because, well, partially because the ending has become such a cultural touchstone, and has become just an element of pop culture. The Animaniacs talked about it. I feel like I sort of would know where it's going. And I know I'm wrong. I know that it's a fine piece of cinema, but I just haven't had any desire to see it just because I know where it's going.
That being said, if you haven't seen Star Wars, go watch it. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to watch it either. Maybe I will. I don't know. I shouldn't say I won't because you never know. But I don't have any desire. I know people will say that. Eric said it was a pinnacle of cinema, but the pinnacle of cinema, as we all know, was Avengers Endgame. Okay. And I know this because when Avengers Endgame ended, I said to my kids, that experience was so great. If I never see another movie in my life, I'll be okay. Mm-hmm. And I have felt that way. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I've seen some movies. They're great. I'll keep going to see movies. It's not like I'm done.
Sure.
But I have almost no anticipation. I like seeing the new Marvel movies, and I get excited about them, everything, but nothing will top that moment in my life. So that's the pinnacle for me, anyway.
I can see where you're coming from there.
I mean, before that, though, the pinnacle was Return of the King.
Yep, I would also agree with that one. I'd be totally with you on there.
So I don't know. Maybe that will happen again.
Yeah, it just you got to get some build up. You have to.
You really do.
Avengers Endgame took 10 years to get there.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, and I got to share it with my kids.
Yeah.
So there's that. Maybe I'll share it with grandkids at some point.
There you go.
I don't know. We'll see. All right. Well, folks, welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Tom Vassell.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Eric Summerer.
Okay, I can't even do a Halloween thing because you're listening to this post-Halloween.
After Halloween. Welcome to November.
Oh, you know what that means? We have begun the descent on the hill.
Yeah, yes, it's all downhill. We've got a retreat on the horizon. We've got Thanksgiving. We've got PAX coming up, and then it's Christmas and New Year's, and what do you know? It's 2022.
Speaking of PAX, folks have been asking me about PAX. I have made the decision to not go to PAX. That decision was reopened this week because PAX was kind enough to invite me to come. But I finally today decided no. And folks, if anything else, it's more of a time issue than anything. PAX is the second week of December this year, which is entirely too close to both Christmas and our Winter Spectacular on Dice Tower video.
Yeah. Yep. I will be there. Not planning a whole lot yet. I'll be sort of a free agent and trying to play some games that I haven't had a chance to play and see some new stuff and see people for the first time in a while. So if you see me walking around, give me a wave. I'm excited.
Yes. So you're seeing people is, I think, for me, a good reason to go to these things. But yeah, just not this year, folks. We'll see about next year.
Yeah.
But if you do want to see us for sure, Dice Tower East registration has gone live.
Yes, it has.
And tickets are selling. The hotel was almost sold out last I spoke, but we'll find a way to get more rooms there, folks. So don't get too worried about that. But come over 1,000 people are coming so far, and we'd love to have you join us for hijinks. And actually, hijinks is a terrible word for a convention.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to advertise that.
I just want to get together, have a good time, and play games in Orlando, Florida, the first week of July. Folks, come and join us. You can find more at dicetowereast.com.
Cool.
And other stuff's coming up too. Dice Tower West, obviously, for Vegas. You got 2 different cons to pick from, folks, to go to. That being said, I have been getting a lot of games played here. And so the first one I want to talk about is Savannah Park. Now, Savannah Park is a game I think you might like, Eric.
Okay.
Because one of the games it reminds me of is Take It Easy, which I'm not sure you've played.
But online, I think. Yeah.
I know you've played Karuba.
Yep.
So this has some similarities to that. In this game, you have a bunch of tiles that you're going to put on this board in front of you that are all different animals. Different types of animals. Some of the tiles have 1 animal, some have 2, some have 3, some have 1 of 2 different animals, some have an animal with a watering hole, and then there's one that has all the animals with a watering hole. So what you're going to do is you put these out randomly. Everyone just randomly puts them out on their board, and there's some open spaces on your board that are going to be left open. And each person, you start with one person, go around the table, picks a tile. So Eric might say the single zebra, or the 2 elephant tile, or the giraffe and antelope tile, whatever tile. Mm-hmm. And everybody will take that tile from where it's at currently and stick it in one of the empty spots. They then flip that tile over to show that that tile's been used. The tiles all are one color, but then when you flip it over, it's your player color so that you know it's finished.
Okay.
And you just keep doing this until all the tiles are flipped over. There's some fire markers on the board. At the end of the game, they scare away animals. There's like a single, a double, and a triple fire. And if you place an animal next to those of that type, it will scare it away, and that's discarded. And there's also some tree spaces and bush spaces on the board. And if you have those uncovered at the end of the game, you get points for those. But most of your points are going to come from groups of animals. You want to have as many of the same type of animal clustered together. You'll take your biggest group of whatever animal, say elephants, multiply the number of animals times the number of watering holes that's there, which could be at most, I think, 3. And that's it. You do that for all 6 groups, and whoever has the most points is the winner. It's really an entertaining game for me because it has that feel of bingo. Someone calls a tile out. You're like, all right, I'm moving that tile. Tiny Towns has the same feel to it.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's something about that. So you'll move it. Sometimes the tile's where you want it already, but you're not allowed to put it back in the same place you pick it up from. So you try to move stuff in, with the idea of moving other things next to it in the future. But then I might need to move a tile that's next to, like, let's say I have the 3 elephants. You want to put maybe the 3 elephant next to an elephant with a watering hole so that you can get a lot of points. But the elephant with the watering hole might have tiles around it. So you're hoping someone else says to move one of those. And if not, you'll say it on your turn, right? Mm-hmm. But then when it comes to Eric's turn, he says 3 elephants. And I'm like, oh, come on. I don't have a spot open for that yet. So I move it farther away and then hope I can move the tiles in between to connect them with elephants. Meanwhile, there's animals that are part of both groups, multiple groups. So you're trying to put those next to each other so that they're part of both groups. So if it shows a rhino and an ostrich, I want that to be the rhino. I want that to be between the rhino and the ostrich groups. Either way, it's really interesting. I really like it. It's a puzzly style game. It's very abstract. It's from the dream team of Kramer and Kiesling, who make a lot of great games. And Capstone's bringing this one to America. So I'm pretty pumped about this one.
Sounds a little like King Domino, but with a movement of tiles aspect and less laying of tiles in the first place.
Yeah, so Savannah Park here does have that movement of tiles, that aspect of, I want to move this tile to another spot, but once it's there, it stays there. So your board is getting smaller and smaller. You'll always have, I don't remember how many open spots there were, I think 8 or 9. So you have a lot of options, but it I don't know, there's just something about it I like. I really enjoyed this. So that's Savannah Park.
Cool.
From Capstone.
First up for me is a game called Witchstone. This is a collaborative design between Reiner Knizia, you may have heard of him, and a designer named Martino Chiacchiera. This is from R&R Games and Huck, Huch. In Witchstone, you have 11 turns in which to build a network on this map between forests and towers and different locations on the board. You're building routes between them with like crystal paths and moving your witches and wizards across the board and scoring points by doing so. And the way this all works is by laying down tiles similarly to a game called Ingenious or Einfach Genial. That was a Knizia game where you've got these domino-like hexagonal tiles, so 2 hexagonal tiles together that you place on your own board, and they have symbols on them that represent the different actions you can take. So there's one that's about route building, and there's one that's about moving your witches across the board, and there's one that gets you bonus scoring cards and stuff like that. And you take one of you've got 5 of them behind your screen, and you take one of them and put it on your board, and you get to trigger both of the actions on that tile. And the more similar symbols you can connect to, the better. The stronger.
Some connection here to Savannah Park, actually.
Yeah, okay, then we're being very thematic here. So if I place down the witch figurine and I connect it to 3 others, I get 4 witch movements, and that's placing them on the board, moving them on my paths. You can move as far as you want on your paths for 1 action, and moving on somebody else's path costs 1 action each. So it's more efficient to build your own paths. And there are also these crystals that start out on your board, and one of the actions is to move them out of the way because you can't place tiles on those crystals. You have to sort of get them out of the way. They're in your way at the beginning of the game. Moving them all the way off your board gets bonus actions. You can trigger other bonus actions by collecting tokens, being the first one to step on a particular zone with one of your witch figurines. Gets you a bonus, gets you extra points. Basically, you're just racing against the other players, trying to be as efficient as possible with your actions and trying to score more points at the end of the game. You get more points for standing your witch figurines on different spaces. You're trying to claim as many as you can. Build routes. You have sort of a ticket to ride thing. The longer the route is that you complete, the more points it's worth when you complete it. Everything is basically the bigger the action, the more powerful it is. And after 11 turns, I think you have 15 total tiles. So on your last turn, you will have your final 5 tiles in front of you. You will play one of them, and that is your last turn. You score points. You total up the points. There's some endgame scoring with some cards you can collect at the end. And it's very straightforward. The individual actions are very easy to understand. Once you've learned what those 6 symbols, those possibilities are on your turn, it's pretty straightforward. I think this is definitely family weight. It plays relatively quickly. It seemed pretty straightforward. And it is sort of nice to not have, usually when you're playing Ingenious, you want to score, big points with large clusters of a particular color, but not so big and easy for somebody else to come along and basically do it even better than you. If I'm building purple and I make 6 of them, but make it easy for somebody to score 7 of them, then I'm not staying ahead of the game. Here, you're only messing with your own board, so leaving opportunities open for yourself to make better connections, and like you said with Savannah Park, Tom, putting the 2 different symbols in between the clusters of those 2 different symbols so you can utilize that one domino twice or more efficiently for both sets is important if you can make it work. So I liked that puzzly aspect. The race seemed very straightforward. I don't know if this is one that I'm like dying to play again. It was fun. It was simple to understand, but it didn't really grab me in the way that I'm like, well, now I really need to try this again. I really need to figure out the puzzle, because the luck of the draw is that really determines what you're going to be able to do on your turn as far as positioning your tiles. So I would certainly play it again, but it's not one that I'm seeking out. So I'm sort of middle of the road on Witchstone from R&R Games and Huck.
Well, let me ask you this. If you hadn't known Knizia designed it, would you have thought that so?
Certainly, I would have said this feels a lot like Ingenious, at least the portion of where you're using your own.
Well, that's one mechanism, though. But, I mean, again, I think anyone can use a mechanism.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because I felt after playing it, I said, this really feels like a Feld. Because
there
the
were
different
lots of
actions
ways to
you
score
take
points.
Boards, right? They affect the other ones and stuff. I like this game. I think I like it more than Eric does. I think it's pretty fun. It's interesting. My biggest concern with this is the theme is so generic. I mean, come on with this stupid mix things in a potion. I'm just getting so tired of that.
Yeah, and the cauldron looks very Quacks of Quedlinburg-y. You have a cauldron and you're placing tiles on it. It's not quite the same spiral, but you look at a weird-shaped cauldron player board, and you're like, hey, this is Quacks. It's not.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like it, but this is definitely in that category of games that is people are going to forget about in I wouldn't say a month, because it may already be forgotten, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's worth your time to play. It's in the Dice Tower library, I mean, because I think it's a solid, good game. But we'll see where it ends up, in the future.
Right.
All right. Well, last week, Eric talked about an exit game. Eric, which exit game did you mention last time?
Oh, boy. It's been a couple weeks since I talked about it. I think the last one I talked about was one of the puzzles, I think, the jigsaw puzzle, which would have been... Oh, I think the last one I talked about was the digital implementation, the Hotel Ophir.
Got it. Well, I'm talking today about, I think it's their newest one, called Exit Kidnapped in Fortune City.
Yeah, this is one I hadn't heard of.
This is a Western-themed one, and this one I forget who you are. You might be the deputy, but either way, the sheriff's been kidnapped, and you need to rescue him. So, as the sheriff is being kidnapped, and you try to find him, you are doing so as an escape room style game. But there's two things about this one that set it apart from the other exit games. And one is there's different buildings in town, and this isn't really a spoiler because this is part of the game. And these buildings are like little pages, and they're folded so that you can see the front is the front of the building, and you can flip it over and see the back, but you can open the front and then find the puzzles inside the building.
Okay.
So as you go into these buildings, and the thing is, each of these buildings puzzles, there's a map of the town and everything. You can do them in any order, which is a big departure from most exit games. The original exit games were a little more open-ended, but recently most exit games follow a very linear path. Solve this puzzle. Okay, now you got this. Now solve that puzzle. Then go to the next one. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I think lately that's certainly the case. The one about the Stargate, the gate between worlds that I talked about fairly recently, did have those little booklets, which sounds like what these building pamphlets are. But you had to basically progress from one to the other in sequence. You couldn't really hop around.
Yeah, so here you don't have to. You can go to them in any order. So you're doing all this, solving puzzles, and once you're done with the puzzles, then you go to the final puzzle, which is figuring out who done it. And so this is a big part of the game. As you solve these puzzles, they give you clues. You meet different people in town who give you their alibi. So the second, not half of the game, but a good chunk of it is putting all this stuff together to figure out who did it, which is a very different game than an exit game. So when it comes to these puzzle games, I always figure that there's two types of them. There's the one where you put these triangles in an order, and if you do so, the door opens. Okay. Then there's other ones where you get a whole pile of newspaper clippings and pictures and stuff, and you got to figure out how the crime was happened. That particular game has been around since who knows how long, decades. The escape room's new. This mixes the two. When you're done doing all the escape room, then you figure out who did it. I like the combination of the two of them. I don't know that everybody will, because some people like one more than the other. If you like Chronicles of Crime, you'll like the second half of this game. But if you like escape room games, you'll like the first half. But I think there's a good Venn diagram of people who the crossover does work for. Like, I suspect you would like that.
Interesting. I mean, I've had a few of the, not exits, the unlock games that have a mystery at the end that I have not liked as much because I didn't quite figure it out. So I feel like...
But here, unlike Unlock, though, you have all these things in front of you. So like Unlock, you're like, oh, I missed this at that one point. Maybe I should have written this down. Here you still have all the papers and clues, and you can just compare them.
Okay. It's possible. I think it all depends on how well... I guess I don't like getting to the end and possibly failing. Like, I solved all the puzzles, but I missed this clue, and so I didn't see the red lapel at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't know that you can miss it because it's all there.
Okay.
If you've solved the other puzzles, the stuff's sitting in front of you. Anyway, I thought it was fun. So that's the newest exit, which I think in the middle of all this, I shut down the window with our show notes in.
It's Kidnapped in Fortune City. So next for me is a deck building game called Decko, and that's Decko because it's a deck building game. It's from Rio Grande Games. It was originally published a couple years ago in 2019 as a game called Promenade, which I never played.
I never played that one.
Yeah, I don't have any relation to it. But the designer is Tate Wu, and the Rio Grande version uses a whole bunch of artists, which is appropriate for a game about art. Lauren Brown, Alex Ekman-Lawn, Brigitte Indelicato, Kwanchai Moria, Allison Parks, Heather Vaughn, and Tate Wu have a credit for some of the art in the game. You are creating a collection of paintings. And the reason there are so many artists is that each one of those artists has sort of one of the suits. You've got some Renaissance paintings and pop art paintings and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of different suits, and at the beginning, they're all basically the same value. They're all currently worth 1 coin in your deck. You have a section of the board. You also have some money cards that are worth money. And all the money cards, at least for the 1, 2, and 3 value cards, have a little extra power on them. If you use that power, you have to get rid of the card. It trashes the card when you use it. Or you can just use it as regular money. So you've got money and you've got paintings in your deck. There's a section of the board that is paintings for sale. And at the beginning of the game, there's sort of groupings of 3 of them, and they're very inexpensive. 1 coin, 2 coins, 3 coins, 4 coins, 5 coins. And you can pick up these paintings. And there's also a section for exhibiting the paintings, which costs a good amount of money, but that's one way to earn lots of points. You are acquiring paintings and putting them on exhibitions to raise the value of these different suits and hopefully score more points than your opponents when the game ends. On your turn, you can what they call haggle, which is basically discard 1 card and draw 2 cards to hopefully get something better into your hand. You could acquire a card, paying a certain amount of money in both coin cards and painting cards that are worth varying values to acquire one of the cards on the table. There's both these paintings in these clusters, and there's also new money cards, value 3 cards and value 5 cards that you can also purchase. So that's one thing you can do, or you can exhibit, which is paying a good amount of money to put one of these paintings from your deck into one of the slots in the museum, which is going to earn you points. Also, anytime you do this stuff, when you buy a painting and when you exhibit a painting, it increases the value of that suit by a certain amount. And as these paintings go up in value, they reach thresholds where now they're worth more money in your deck. So if I do a lot of actions with Renaissance paintings, I might make them worth 2, 3, even 4 coins in my deck, now making them more powerful for scoring, for buying cards and for scoring points at the end of the game. So I continue doing this. I get 2 actions on a turn between the haggling, the acquiring, and the exhibiting. And I'm trying to acquire the paintings cheaply and exhibit them so that I earn lots of points and increase the value of all of this. Even the money can change value so that it's worth more, has a better exchange ratio at the end of the game. This continues as you empty the different shopping columns, the paintings become more expensive, so that one coin column has really cheap paintings at first, but then when that empties out, you swap out the one cost tile for a higher cost tile. The paintings get more and more expensive, and people start exhibiting. And once one of the paintings reaches a certain cost level, the game ends. This could also happen if somebody buys too much money. That can also trigger the end of the game. You score up points. There's also some endgame scoring bonus tiles that are different every game. I've been playing this on Board Game Arena. I haven't actually played the physical copy of this, but I've really been enjoying just the pace of the whole thing, and it really, I think it works as a deck building, as a twist on the deck building genre. That is Art Deco from Rio Grande Games.
All right, the next game I'm going to talk about is Unfathomable, which is a game in which you are a crew member of the ship Atlantis. I believe it's Atlantis. Crossing the Atlantic Ocean. No, it's Atlantica. That's the name of it. Atlantica.
Okay. Sure. Atlantis doesn't sound like it's going to do well for floating.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it sounds cool. Anyhow, so it's crossing the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, and suddenly Cthulhu-esque monsters, I shouldn't say Cthulhu-esque monsters, they are from Cthulhu, they're attacking the ship and, eating passengers and causing havoc. And there's two giant deep ones, Mother something and Father Dagon, or I don't remember their names, but they're two big ones. And so these are coming by and attacking you. And you got 4 dials. You have passengers, you have sanity, you have fuel, and you have food, and you can't run out of any of these dials. And so you as crew members are taking turns in this cooperative game trying to stop these bad things from happening. Beating the little fish people who get on your ship, throwing them off, just trying to, you each turn there's likely these tests that you have to do, or else bad things happen, or sometimes the bad thing's going to happen anyway, but a worse thing might happen. And meanwhile, speed the ship along as fast as you can to get to the shore. Some of the players, however, happen to be evil. All right, so they're hybrids. They're actually, half fish person, half human. I guess they're hiding it pretty well, and they're trying to stop everybody else. There's even, depending on the number of players, you can play with a cultist who is sort of with the hybrids, in that they want the ship to sink, but they want the ship to get to a certain distance before it sinks. So mostly because they can't swim. You want it to get close enough to shore, sink the ship, and then you can swim to shore.
Okay.
So if this sounds familiar to anyone listening...
It does, yeah. So when does Admiral Adama come in?
No, instead of Admiral, there's a captain of the ship, and then instead of a president, there is a keeper of the tomb. That's because this game, folks, is a blatant remake of Battlestar Galactica. Has a different designer. It's based on the original design from Corey Konieczka. And the Battlestar Galactica license, I don't know if Fantasy Flight still has it. I don't know that they even care if they have it, because it's not like a hot license right now.
Right.
And,
well, last I knew, they were remaking it into something new. So whatever license they had for the sci-fi version might not be what is happening now.
Sure. It is. So it's essentially the same game. So if you don't know, Battlestar Galactica is the game that probably popularized having a traitor in a game like this. The first game to do it was Shadows over Camelot.
Right.
But I think Battlestar Galactica was a longer, more in-depth game. Shadows over Camelot's fairly straightforward. I really like it. And honestly, it's the game of the two that I would personally prefer to play more. But Battlestar Galactica, there's other games that have come out since then, like Dead of Winter, and then a whole slew of social deduction games. And so this game follows that. It doesn't really shorten the game length down. That's what I was kind of hoping for.
Okay.
It's still a fairly long game. There are some things that are streamlined. In Battlestar Galactica, some players were pilots, and they could jump into a little ship and fly outside and shoot down the Cylon Raiders. Here, anybody can go out on the deck and fight off the monsters.
Okay.
It's fine. Here's the thing. I don't think the game has changed. I think I've changed.
All right.
When Battlestar Galactica came out, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was cool. They kind of bloated it up with a bunch of expansions. And each time I played it, I got less excited about it because I thought, man, I like this social deduction stuff, but why do I want to play 3 hours of it? So...
Because it's Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah. So I like that, and it's fun, but I just find myself getting to wanting to play it less and less. This doesn't change anything, and for me personally, the Cthulhu theme is very overused. Now, I'll say this is a really cool usage of it. It's the ship and the darkness as the ship hurtles through the waters and crew members turning it and monsters from the deep. I kind of like that, actually. It feels like a little bit different of, different shoot of Arkham Horror. And they picked new characters, so it's not the same old characters that they've stuck in every other game. Ashcan Pete is not in this one.
Okay.
So I liked it a lot. I felt like it got too long. I liked the first half of the game better than the second. I can look at this in the distance and go, some people are going to love it and they're going to enjoy it. And if I was wrangled into a game of this, I would enjoy it too. Although near the end, I think I would be thinking about what's the next game we're going to play. And so I feel like that's where it's at. If you like Battlestar Galactica, I really think you'll like this. If you didn't like Battlestar Galactica, this might fix problems with it if you had a few, because it does streamline the game a little bit, but it's still just as long. And maybe if the Battlestar Galactica theme didn't do anything for you, the Arkham Horror theme will do better. I don't know. But yeah, for me, it's kind of a miss, but not because it's bad. I just wish they were able to say it's 2 hours or less. I don't always want to play a game. For me, playing a game that's long is not necessarily a problem. I can play long games. Playing long games with a lot of tension involved in them feels longer to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
So that's why I hate Diplomacy, right? Diplomacy is a 7-hour game, and so is Twilight Imperium. Twilight Imperium, I don't feel stressed the whole time. I mean, yes, you're fighting each other, but I'm not sitting there with like, who's the traitor, or will people figure out I'm the traitor? That's what Battlestar Galactica / Unfathomable has, isn't it? And for that reason, it feels longer than the time length that it takes. So anyway, that's Unfathomable from Fantasy Flight Games.
Let's say you're coming at it from a different direction. Say you've been able to play someone else's copy of Battlestar Galactica, or you've just heard about what a wonderful social deduction game Battlestar Galactica is. Do you think Unfathomable will fill that void since you can't get BSG anymore?
It depends how strongly tied you are to the theme.
True.
Because, I thought Battlestar Galactica was fairly thematic. It really was. They did a good job at translating the theme over. I think the theme works. It doesn't feel like I'm playing Battlestar Galactica with a different theme. They worked hard, but I can see some people loving that theme. If you don't care about the theme, then this game should satiate you.
Okay. So I'm talking about a much shorter game, and one that you recommended, Tom. Based on your recommendations, I sought out So Clover, which is the latest word game from Repos Productions. The designer is Francois Romain. It is a word game where everybody has a neat little dry erase board, plastic board that's shaped like a clover, that has space for these 4 cards that have a hole in them. They're square cards with a hole in them. So you draw 4 of these, and you shuffle them up and randomize them and sort of twist them around and put them on this board. So now they're in a square, of a 2x2 square. And now there are 2 words on each of the sides of the square. You then have to come up with a 1-word clue that describes those 2 words. Simple. You write that on the leaves of the clover. And then once you're done, you take those 4 cards off. Take 1 more card from the deck, shuffle all 5 of those up, mix them up, twist them around, and then cooperatively, after everyone has done this for their own boards, you're going to take turns and let the rest of the group try and reposition the cards where they're supposed to go. which is kind of cool because sometimes that fifth card adds a lovely wrinkle and makes a connection you did not intend to happen, no matter how amazing your clues are. Once everybody says, yep, we think that's right, you say, okay, you either got it all right, or you take away the cards that are not in the correct position, and they get one more attempt to score fewer points, although this is one of those games that you don't really worry about the scoring too much. And then if you still haven't gotten it right, then you failed that round for you. You play a certain number of rounds and score, but again, I don't care about scoring. This is about having fun, playing round after round, trying to guess everybody's clues. I find it to be a nice, snappy word game. It offers some cool decisions and some nice aha moments when you do manage to get a clue right. It is, however, one of those games that provides quite the wrinkle when you play with your kids. I played this with adults first, ran out, found a copy at my local gaming store, and tried it with my two boys, the 13 and 10-year-old. And when the kids have just a more limited vocabulary, they can have some trouble with this, to the point where my 10-year-old started making up words. I think he had church and nurse, and so he wrote down churse, C-H-U-R-S-E, on that pedal. I think we did eventually figure it out, so I guess that was a good clue. But it is an extra challenge when playing Clover. This is one that's going to come out a lot. This just like Just One, which is also from Repos. This one's going to see lots of quick rounds. It offers an opportunity for people to jump in, jump out in between rounds. It's a good one. I really enjoy Clover.
Yeah, one of the things about this one, I think that's worth noting, is that I think Just One's going to have a slightly larger appeal to it because, as much I love Clover a lot, don't get me wrong, but you will run into some people, and maybe you're one of them, I mean, that's fine, who sit there and go, I just can't think of any words to write down. That can happen, but you can also play this game where you just say, okay, then you don't have to write one down. You can just guess at other people's clues. And yeah, likely that's not a big deal. I mean, I think anyway.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you just can't come to an you can give somebody the board and have them try it, and if it doesn't work out for them, that's fine. You just sit out that round. That's fine.
Well, this would have made a lot more sense had it come after my game Unfathomable. Since moving into horror, but let's jump from some games now to a tale of horror.
Moo ha ha.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror.
Oh my, that's horrific.
Gather round, children. Being in high school and coming of age in the 1970s was a great time for anyone who discovered gaming. The decade that began with me playing Clue with the family and joining the high school chess club ended with Squad Leader, Cosmic Encounter, Kingmaker, and of course, Dungeons and Dragons. By the early 80s, I was raising a family of my own with less time for gaming. Talisman came on the scene. It was like D&D condensed into 2 to 3 hours. My gaming buddies loved it, and I happily bought every expansion that came out. Dungeon, Adventure, City, Dragons, Timescape, and even managed to get the hard-to-find master-level characters published in White Dwarf. As time went on, I upgraded the cardboard playing pieces for gold. Lives, wisdom, and strength with small plastic and metal tidbits, which I was able to locate in the small specialty shops that used to reside all along Canal Street in New York City. This was in the mid-1980s, well before the dawn of all those specialty companies that now exist to upgrade just about every game that becomes popular. Then Games Workshop came out with the crowning touch for the game. Miniatures that you could buy and paint for all of the characters. There were 60, and I bought them all. Together, with the help of my good friend Dan, we got them all painted in beautiful detail. All 5 of my children loved playing the game, and in many ways considered it the first real board game they ever played.
By the early 2000s, with multiple revisions now published and the miniatures no longer available, it became clear that what I had was now a family gaming heirloom. It had also significantly increased in value. Yet, I lacked a way to safely store the 60 expertly painted miniatures. Remember, this was nearly 20 years ago when foam storage cases were just arriving on the scene. From those I saw available, none seemed to really fit my need. Then, upon taking our youngest on a trip to the Crayola factory and museum in eastern Pennsylvania, I discovered Crayola Model Magic. It's a lightweight, non-toxic, clay-like foam substance that once you mold it into a shape, hardens overnight. Here, at last, I saw the perfect solution to safely store my complete set of talisman miniatures. Soon after, I had purchased an appropriately sized flat plastic storage box and over a half-dozen packages of the Model Magic. I worked the foam into a single flat layer within the box and then carefully pressed each miniature into the foam. The foam hardened overnight, and voila! Each miniature had a perfect form-fitted place for it to rest safely when stored. I checked to be sure and was delighted to find that not a single one was in any way remotely permanently locked in place. And so it was that shortly afterwards, my talisman game, expansions, and precious miniatures were safely stowed away into my game closet. Or so I thought. For I would sadly discover that the definitions of non-toxic and malevolent are not exclusive in the world of talisman. A year passed before we decided to play talisman again, and with full expectation of opening my custom-made miniatures case for all to see, we took the game from the closet. I placed the game upon our game table and opened it, revealing the horror within. On figure after figure, the paint had flaked or peeled, but never completely on any single miniature. It was horrific. Instead of my 60 beautifully painted talisman characters, I now had 60 miniatures that looked like the Comic-Con costume parade. Suddenly, they were all zombies from The Walking Dead. Whatever Crayola ingredient chemical that was rated non-toxic and thus safe enough for a child to potentially eat turned out to be deadly to the paint on my treasured talisman figures. Over time, it had slowly leached from the modeling foam, like some bizarre, cancerous acid rain attacking, causing lesions and discoloration. In many places of fine detail and recesses, the paint remains, meaning repainting will cause a clear loss of detail. Sadly, to this day, I have yet to be able to bring myself to attempt any sort of repair or repainting.
This makes me really sad.
Loss of detail!
Well, it makes me sad because I like Crayola so much.
It seemed like an ingenious solution. You gotta give him credit.
Yeah, it really does sound great. Oh, well.
It's not a test case, I'm sure. It's like, how does it deal with model paint? No one tested that.
Well, now we know.
Until now.
Now we know.
Learn from this person's mistake. Don't use Wonder Clay or whatever it was called. Model Magic.
Well, here's my question then. So would you consider that to be scary? Is that a real scary story?
It's a scary story in that when you open up the site is horrific.
All righty. Well, let's talk a little bit more about horror.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for Game Tech with Geoff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
It's Halloween time. Well, it probably was a few days ago by the time this airs, but that spooky feeling is still with us. Now, around this time of year, I always see people make lists of games they want to play at their Halloween parties. And while they're thematically appropriate, ghosts and ghoulies, they're usually not actually scary. I think a lot about emotions that games can elicit. Is fear one of them? Now, of entertainment media, I think that movies are probably the best at scaring people, closely followed by video games. They have so many tools at their disposal, including lighting, music, and scene setting. Board games have a tougher time of this. There are a number of reasons why, and I'm sure you know most of them. First, you have more distance from a board game, both physically and mechanically, than you do from a video game. You're usually seated around a table, and typically the lighting needs to be pretty good so you can see the pieces. And often you need to shift tracks, move counters, and similar mechanical activities. You also have to worry about what phase it is, whose turn it is, how the rules work, and all that mechanism stuff that board games bring along with them. All of that can dissipate the scare factor. But on closer examination, I think that tabletop games, given the right conditions, can be genuinely scary. Now, before moving ahead, I'd like to break down scary into a few different categories. The first is the jump scare, something that startles you. Another is a creepy feeling or dread, the feeling that something is not right. And finally, there's suspense and tension, which can kind of be separate from a specific thematic category. Now, these categories can overlap somewhat. You can have a jump scare that creates tension because you know it's coming, for example, but I think it's useful to think about these three vectors. So first, let's take a look at jump scares. They actually have a long history in board games. A famous example is Perfection, which I think is actually pretty scary and perhaps one of the scariest games I'm going to talk about today. In Perfection, for those of you unfamiliar, you have to put shapes into matching holes before a timer runs out. But if it does, the board pops up and it throws all the pieces into your face. The scare factor in Perfection is amplified by a few features. First, you are very focused on the task that you are doing. You rarely have time to look at the timer and see how close it is to popping. And you usually have your face pretty close to the board to be able to see the different holes. These factors combine so that when that board does pop, it is frightening indeed. Now, there are a number of games that have a jump scare element, often aimed at families and kids. Don't Wake Daddy and Crocodile Dentist rely on a similar idea to Perfection, where you don't know when something is going to pop, and it startles you. Jenga also is in this family with the tower collapse. Now, tension is related to the jump scare, but it can also be introduced by putting known bad events or results into the game that may come up at any time. It doesn't have to be something that's actually startling that's going to jump out at you. Robinson Crusoe, for example, will give you the first part of an event. You cut your leg, as an example, but then you seed a much worse outcome, your leg becomes infected, into the event deck. Depending on how the game goes, it may never come up at all, or it may come up at the worst possible time. But knowing that this card is in the deck gives the players a sense of fear and tension, like a bomb sitting under the table, as Hitchcock would say. Many games use similar systems. Now, creepy is a little bit harder to come by. I don't think that it can be accomplished by theme alone. There are many monsters or ghosts or slasher themed games, but they typically are campy and over the top, as if the designers know that the players will not engage on a fear level with the game, so they need to make it humorous. Most zombie games fall into this category. Even if they're not particularly humorous, they can get tense, but I don't think they really get creepy. I think that to achieve this, games need to control the environment in which the game is played. As I mentioned earlier, video games create creepy scenes by controlling lighting. There are several games that do that as well. Vampire Hunter from 2002 is designed to be played in the dark. There is a central tower that lights up different spots on the board at different times. It's aimed at kids, so it doesn't quite get scary for adults, but is an interesting technique. Nyctophobia puts some players completely in the dark, forcing them to wear blindfolds and move pieces by touch, as one sighted player chases them with an axe. There are other games that are designed to be played in the dark, with candles or flashlights illuminating certain parts of the board, or allowing the player pieces to hide in shadows. Even the simple Ouija board is way more effective as a group activity if it is done in the dark by candlelight. Now, sound and music can also augment the environment and spookiness of a game. My kids were both scared to death growing up of the voice of the computer in Omega Virus. It's not designed to be scary, but having sound elevates the emotional response. This use of sound tends to be confined to kids' games, like Curse of the Mummy from back when I was a kid. In that game, the mummy sits in the center of the table and makes various spooky sounds. But you don't see sounds used too much in games aimed at adult gamers. In order for these atmospheric effects to work, though, the game itself needs to be dead simple. Anything that forces the players to look up a rule or figure out how something works is going to immediately break the spell the game is trying to create. Keeping it simple is critical. What are some games that you think can create some good scares? This is Geoff Engelstein with Game Tech.
I feel like Crystal and I just talked about this on an episode of Dice Tower Tonight, and I'm happy to say that we came to some of the same conclusions Geoff did, so I'm going to count that as a win.
I'm going to make... Okay, so I have one small disagreement with him. I personally think because he said movies do it the best, and to a lesser degree, video games. I think a scary video game is scarier than a scary movie.
Oh, yeah, because it's like
you.
Direct agency.
It's you who's that person.
Yeah.
So, and again, maybe that could just be me thinking that, right? But man, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there. Geoff also said he couldn't think of any examples of the slow burn creepiness that you can get that gives you that more disturbing result of fear. And I'm sure there are some escape room games that are much the Escape Tales series, for one, is one that can be much more disturbing and sort of stay with you afterward. There are some other games, too, usually story-based ones, that can be a little more disturbing, the slow burn fear.
Well, I mean, recently, I just played a new game from Smirk and Dagger. I don't know if you've seen their new game.
I haven't.
It's The Night Cage.
Oh, yes, I've heard about it, but I haven't.
Yeah, so I think The Night Cage gives me a really creepy vibe, because in this, you're prisoners who are locked in some darkness, and you're not really sure why you're locked in this darkness, and you are crawling out of it, and you just turn over a tile and see what happens, and sometimes the tile has a monster on it, and I don't know, there's just this unease creepiness about the game overall. But again, right, there's still that ambience. The ambience matters when there's no sound and smells, right, and whatever else. So, and I don't know that games even should have that in them per se.
You don't want the game to smell scary when you open it?
Well, I want the game to be spooky, scary, but not really scary. Yeah. I mean, what about that game you played a long time ago, that escape room one where you were a deranged murderer?
Yes, that one definitely was disturbing.
But disturbing and scary are slightly different.
Right. I mean, I still don't want to play that one again, so it succeeded there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting topic to me, and I don't know that I'm just of the opinion that board games shouldn't try to do this per se. I don't think you don't really get anything out of it.
I don't know. I mean, it just like a board game that's actually able to get some sort of emotional reaction out of you is memorable. I think it's worth trying.
Well, let me rephrase it then. I guess I'm saying that you shouldn't expect it out of a board game. How's that?
Sure. I guess. You shouldn't go into the board game expecting to be scared. But when it succeeds, then it is quite the surprise.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Of course, as you know, the Halloween is over now. And for some reason, people always, when Halloween's over, people are like, and that's it for scary games.
I do not want to be scared anymore.
Let's all start playing the Christmas games. Oh, wait. There isn't any.
There's 3 or 4. That's about it.
Yeah, there is a few Christmas games. All right, well, let's keep moving.
Support for the Dice Tower comes from TheOp, bringing you Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game. From the popular side-scrolling run-and-gun video game, Cuphead, comes an all-new fast-action original cooperative dice game from TheOp. In Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game, you work together to be quick and nimble to avoid the attacks and defeat the bosses to win. Roll to fill your move meter with jump, parry, and attack moves as you battle against familiar bosses, but hurry before the timer runs out. It includes 8 fan-favorite boss decks, custom dice, custom art, and more. Replay over and over again to try and beat your high score. It's a must-have for any Cuphead fan. Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game, is available now at TheOp.games or your friendly local game store. And don't forget the promo code for Dice Tower listeners. You can get 10% off your entire purchase at TheOp.games. It's available for all games, puzzles, and accessories. Also, free shipping is available on purchases of $49 or more. Offer available for U.S. residents only. Enter the code DICETOWER at TheOp.games. Questions. Jeremiah kicks us off today with a couple of questions. 1, how do you join the Dice Tower Network? And 2, how detailed is your outline/script for an episode of the Dice Tower podcast?
Well, the first one is a longer question, essentially. A longer answer, I suppose. Podcasts email me about being part of the Dice Tower Network, and we add them a few times over the course of the year because I want to listen to the podcast if possible. And I also don't think every podcast world needs to be part of the Dice Tower Network. I'm not trying to reign supreme over the internet with the podcast. I'm also looking for podcasts that add something different if possible. But I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Right. It's sort of an asks thing, and occasionally things get added.
Well, the show notes, though. The show notes,
indeed. We try and... Certainly stuff like Tale of Horror, that's all written out. But stuff like what games did we play, it's usually just a list of titles, and we go much more free form on that. Same with the top 10 list. It's just 1 through 10. We don't usually write down our notes as far as what we want to say about any of the games. I'll sometimes add a little Post-it note to talk about a designer's name that I need to remember, and occasionally we put other little reminders in the text, but it's basically more of a set of bullet points, a rundown of what we're trying to talk about. We try and keep it, I guess, by not putting too much down on digital paper, by actually keeping it free form. It keeps it more spontaneous and hopefully makes it more of a conversation than just us reading.
You know what?
Stuff.
If someone I want to wait till after this goes live, but if someone wants to remind me in our Facebook group, I can actually post one of our show notes there, so you can just look at it.
Ooh, I got to make sure I didn't write anything I don't want seen.
Tom is a jerk. Yeah, but no, I mean, it's pretty innocuous, but you can see what it looks like when we go through one of these. All right, James says he and his wife have recently started using Concept as an always out game, meaning they leave it set up on the table, and every day one of us will set out markers, and the next time the other comes home and notices new clues, we'll text the other and see if we're right, and then switch. I know plenty of apps let you take these slow turns, but do you have recommendations or more board games to try this with? Well, if you're in a TV show or movie, they always do this with chess.
Sure.
And I was like, I have a hard time doing this. Eric can do this better than I because he actually does this on online gaming.
Oh, like turn-based stuff?
Yeah,
where I'm only making one move every day?
I don't like that because I come in and I have to say, where was I?
Yep.
And I have to reorient myself in my head. I like the concept idea. I've never actually thought about doing that before. But I'd pass this to Eric. What would you say?
I mean, I sort of like the idea because there's tons of games that have display versions. You know, what's the wooden game Cathedral that has nice wooden chunky pieces, or like you said, chess sets, Go sets, almost any abstract game that has a nice table presence to it would be nice to do this with. You make a move, and then a day or two later, you see someone else has made a move. I don't know if there's. I like the idea of doing it for Concept because it's sort of a thought experiment and not necessarily an adversarial thing. I don't know what else would work well for giving clues like this, but there's tons of abstract games or any two-player game, really, that could allow you to make a move and then just have the person see the changed board state. Is worth a try. Richie says, I'm glad to see a lot of decent mass market games out. In the last 2 weeks, I picked up Gargoyles Awakening at Target and Walt Disney Sidekicks from Amazon. Both games, as do a lot of newer mass market games, come not in shrink, but with little stickers on the edges. This seems good on two fronts. It saves the publisher some money, and hopefully the consumer, and it reduces trash. So far, so good. So why did both of these games shrink wrap the cardboard punch-out boards? I've been buying games for years and almost never see the punch-out boards shrink wrapped. It's even weirder because both games eschewed the shrink wrap on the outside. Have you seen this in any games? Do you or Eric have a theory about the shrink wrap inconsistency? Seriously, why shrink wrap the punch-outs but not the box itself? Thanks for everything you do.
Well, the cynical part of me says that you see the outside of the box. Well,
yeah.
This is, and I'm not trying to get too political here, but I often wonder sometimes why such a big to-do is made about plastic straws that are then given in plastic cups. Or I had a friend of mine who said he really wanted to help with the plastic straws, so he ordered a box of paper straws, and they all came wrapped in plastic, each one individually. So sometimes maybe it's just a thought process. Incidentally, I distinctly thought the same thing on a similar game, Goonies. I remember opening that box and being like, oh, they put these little stickers on, which I hate those little stickers, by the way, although I can't think of a better way to do it without shrink wrapping it.
Right.
But I opened it up and then I thought, everything is shrink wrapped. Everything. It was so weird. I maybe a publisher can tune in. Maybe if you don't do that, the stuff rattles around inside.
I bet that's the case. What I'm guessing is that after the punch board has been punched, there is the chance, and we've all opened up a new game where some of the punch board or some of the tokens have come out of the sprues. They're just rattling around in the box. But that could happen at some other point in the production process, thereby losing that token. And so if you shrink wrap it immediately after punching, then you know everything that belongs in that punch board is there. And so however it's packaged and assembled and stuff, it means it's a single unit and not having to make sure that it's not missing a piece.
Well, that being said, I do know I have gotten some games where the cards have a little paper wrapping around them that's holding them together. Have you seen that lately?
I don't know about lately as a trend, but I have certainly seen that, and it's a whole lot easier than dealing with those shrink-wrapped thingies.
Yeah, it's definitely easy to get it off.
Half the time when they've got the little pull tab, I love the pull tab when it works, but often I'm picking at the side of the package just to get at the pull tab, just as much as I would if there was no pull tab.
I would love to hear from a publisher some of the reasoning behind this stuff. Like another thing that bugs me is when I get a board or something and it's in a plastic bag, or player boards and they're in a plastic bag, and that bag barely fits them to the point where you either have to destroy the bag to get them out, or risk nicking the corners, or you have to. It just takes a really long time, and no one's ever going to put it back in that plastic bag.
Right.
And I'm like, why did you do that instead of shrink wrapping it? I don't know. But I don't know. So basically, that's the answer is I don't know. But maybe somebody could give us the answer to that.
Yeah, it would be neat to talk to either a publisher or somebody that actually produces the games. One of the printers. That would be interesting to talk about.
Sean says, if you were elected to write a Pixar-style animated movie where board games came to life, what would be the personalities of your favorite board games and what actor would voice them? Also, what's the best Monopoly branded product? Two very, very different questions.
Those are two different questions. I imagine that the guy on the front of the Kalis box is voiced by John Lithgow. He sounds like Lord Farquaad from Shrek to me.
Okay. I'll buy that. I could see Arcadia Quest coming to life, but I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know who to voice them. I mean,
that would be fun.
Can I just?
I think Oprah is the voice of the Catan son.
I'll just cheat and say I want a Pixar movie, and John DiMaggio and Billy West do all the voices, or most of the voices.
There you go.
I'll have Tom Kenny.
Yep.
I mean, I'm of the opinion, and this is not to butter up Eric at all, but I'm of the opinion that the best voice actors are not actually actors. That they're voice actors. I think that is a thing in itself, and I think it matters because sometimes it's distracting to hear Brad Pitt. Well, I don't know if he ever did a cartoon, but you know what I mean? You hear a cartoon and it's a famous actor, and it's like, that's difficult for me. With the exception of James Earl Jones. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. And Morgan Freeman, because their voices are that good. And who's the voice of the the Simpsons, the assistant guy who loves his boss?
Smithers? Hank Azaria?
Hank Azaria is a good actor, but he's also a great voice actor.
Yeah, except is that Hank Azaria? No, that's
Hank Azaria did Apu. I remember that, and he did several things on that show. So I might be mixing them up, but I think he's a great voice actor.
Harry Shearer is Smithers, and best Monopoly branded product is Tropical Tycoon.
Yep, agreed.
Clay says, I love to play games, all kinds of games. I got into the board gaming hobby because it was a way to structure play with my friends and family. I've never cared whether I win or lose. I come to a game for the experience. If I'm not winning, then that means one of my friends is winning, and that's plenty fine by me. I've been trying to get into some board games on mobile devices. iPad, Board Game Arena, Tabletop Simulator, etc. I have found that their only real value for me is in teaching me a game I don't own for a fraction of the price it would be to buy them. I don't want to lose a game to a stranger I've never met and will not interact with in any meaningful way. So for me, digital recreations of board games don't have the major thing I come to the hobby for. Is there something I'm missing here? How do I bring the sense of camaraderie I get in the physical space into the digital realm? Do you find digital recreations less so for the same reason? I think you've got a point. I also don't like just jumping into a game with somebody I have absolutely no connection with. What I have found works pretty well is we've got our group on Board Game Arena, which is called the Official Dice Tower Guild. Is that right? And there's
I
sort
forgot
of
that
conversations.
existed.
Yeah. There's conversations going around on the chat board. It's all relatively minor, but you start seeing the same names show up. And so even though I haven't met most of these people, I feel like I'm getting to play multiple games with them, and so it sort of feels like our little group on the site. It's a small thing, but I think it helps to have some sort of connection with the people you're playing with.
A lot of people also use Discord, and Discord helps a lot for that actual in-person thing.
Sure. But I mean that you have to have that connection first. I guess if you are part of a larger group Discord, which there is one. I don't spend as much time on that part, but some folks have set up a Discord on Board Game Arena a Discord for the group on Board Game Arena to be able to set up and communicate for the games there as well.
I'm kind of with you, Clay. But I did get a lot of that camaraderie in the Werewolf games. If you join the Werewolf games at Dice Tower Werewolf Facebook group, I got that camaraderie there. It might be a little bit hard the first couple times because you're new, but that's the same way it would be if you went to an actual board game group for the first time. So I get it. I'm kind of with you, but for a lot of people, this is their only way to game. So, yeah, that's what I'd recommend is just, try to find the same people and play with them more often.
Yeah.
Finally, our last question here is from Gabriel, who says, if I want to review games on YouTube, are there any rights issues I need to worry about? Or by publishing games, are they then open to public review on YouTube and other sites? As far as I know, you can review anything you want as long as you don't lie about what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's rules about using their media. So let's say, for example, a game came with a soundtrack.
Yeah.
I may not be able to play that soundtrack, or even that there's a certain amount of seconds that you can play, and you're fine. But like in the video game industry, I know some companies have been more strict with the people, but people go and play their games online all the time, and they're showing you everything about the game. I have never heard of a legitimate board game company saying anything, even if you really criticize their game, about you showing off stuff from that game. I've maybe in the past heard of a few small ones getting mad and threatening stuff, but what can they do? There's nothing to do. You need to be able to freely criticize games.
If you are reviewing the product that's in front of you, you should be fine. There is stuff to think about when it comes to use of other media. You can't just use any song you want. You have to get production music that's specifically yours. And if you are using any photography or images of the game that you didn't personally take, they should be direct from the publisher. Don't just go on Board Game Geek and grab whatever images you want. That could very well be stealing from somebody who is.
Well, you can if it's Creative Commons. There's licenses.
Yes, you need to look at the rules for the images. You can't just take whatever you want off the net.
But I'll tell you, if YouTube cares about anything, they care about music.
Yes.
If we have music in some of our videos, they will be flagged before the video goes live. YouTube bots are. Now, for the most part, you can still put these videos up. You can still use music and do all this stuff. You just can't monetize it. It's very difficult to get a copyright strike. We got a copyright on our Dice Tower channel. We've gotten a copyright strike one time. It was our error. We fixed it, and the copyright strike was removed eventually.
Oh, that's good.
But it's something I certainly keep an eye on.
Yes. But as far as the criticism of the game itself, you should be fine. As long as you're giving your honest opinions, not lying about the game or misrepresenting what it is, you should be all set.
Yep.
All right. This is going to be an interesting top 10 list. I'm excited about it.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10!
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is brought to you by Game Nerds at GameNerdZ.com.
Well, this is super interesting to me, this list. And I think of this list, this is one of those times where sometimes I might be tempted to go look at the People's Choice and go, give me some ideas. But you can't.
Yeah, that doesn't really work.
So for me, when I made this list, what I did was I went through the games on Board Game Geek. And I went through the list two different ways. I went through the highest ranked games and looked at the games and the highest ranked games that I haven't played. But I also looked at the most played games, like the games that were most rated, the most popular ones, because there's some of those I haven't played. They may not be as highly ranked. And I'll tell you what, I want to make a couple things clear before we start this list. And first of all is me doing this list does not mean I'm going to play these games. Although there's at least 4 games on my list I'm going to play. I have it planned. Within a year, I'll play 4 of the games on my list. Some of these I may never play, but I think I should play them at some point. But so I get it, and don't be like, they're doing it next week. Maybe not. Secondly, this is not an invitation at the next event we go to for you to be like, I know you've been wanting to play this game. Let's do it. Maybe. Okay.
I swear I'm this close to packing your number 1 to bring with me on the
I'll
retreat.
play it if you bring it. If you bring it, I'll play it because, it's my number 1 because I think it's my biggest mistake of not having played it.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, Eric, you have some comments here?
I did want to mention there are a handful of games that I wish that probably should be on this list because I've barely played them, but I've technically played them. Because this list, we didn't actually say, is games that we should have played, or how do we define it? We have not played these, but we should play them. So stuff like the campaign games that I just haven't gotten deep enough into, Gloomhaven, I've only played like a single scenario of. I haven't even gotten into the character aspect of it at all. Seventh Continent, just never got far enough into the story. Pandemic Legacies 2 and 0, still haven't played enough of those. But I've played them a single time or a couple times. And I feel like they should be on the list, but technically they don't.
I get it. But you've had a taste of them, so if I said, and especially Pandemic Legacy 2 and 0. You played the first one, so yes, they're different, but they're also very similar.
It's that I haven't gotten my family to join me for the remaining games. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Different. Here we go.
Number 10.
Gonna kick things off with a game about fashion. This is Ignacy Trzewiczek's Pret-a-Porter. That was just recently re-released in the last couple of years in a new edition, and I still miss the opportunity to play that one. I've just heard wonderful things about it. I think I would enjoy it. I would enjoy a nice different theme, but it just hasn't been an opportunity to play it. Number 10, Pret-a-Porter.
Yeah, that's it's a heavier game, and I think you would enjoy it. My number 10 is Kingdom Death Monster.
Rawr.
Now, yeah, I got to be honest, folks. I don't think there's anything about this game that I'm going to enjoy. I might be wrong, okay? By the time you hear this episode, I will have unboxed it on our channel or well, it doesn't matter. I've already unboxed it. I've opened up and looked at everything inside. And the miniatures are all in a million pieces. Now, someone's putting those miniatures together for me, so there's that. But that would turn me off from doing it. But someone's going to put them together for me, so I'll give it a whirl. There's a kabillion components. That doesn't scare me that much. The fact that you're building characters in this game, but they could die very easily, does not have me that interested in the game. But it's the rule book right now that's maybe turning me off the most, because there are full color page spreads in it that are very, very R-rated. And I'm not talking about just nudity. There's some of that for sure. But there is a lot of just really gross stuff. I'm not talking about slightly gross. I'm talking about really like a horror movie, really deep horror movie level. So none of this stuff's appealing to me. And yet it's in the top 100 on Board Game Geek. And it has its huge fans. So I'm going to give it a whirl at some point. This is one I'm going to try out.
Okay.
But I don't expect to like it. But I want to just give it enough of a whirl so that when people ask me about it, I can hopefully articulate and you know what? Maybe I'll love it. I doubt it, but maybe I will. But that would sound better than me saying, I don't think I'll like it. It would sound better to go, I don't like it. And I know it's going to happen here, right? People are going to go, well, you went into it thinking you were not going to like it. Well, you know what? That's the way most games are. I go into them with an opinion ahead of time. But it could change because it has happened in the past.
This is not on my list.
Kingdom Death Monster. Because you've played it or because you have no desire to play it?
I have no desire to play it.
Well, I'll take the sacrifice for you.
Thank you, sir.
Number 9.
Number 9 is Sleeping Gods from Ryan Lockett. I've taken the first steps to playing this one. I own it. It is on my shelf. I've only gotten as far as trying to unbox it and figure out all the components and try and stick the expansion box in the base box, and then it's just full, and I sort of bounced off the whole thing. But I keep seeing people post about it and how wonderful it is, and I really need to try and get back into it. It looks like a lovely game with lots of wonderful things to explore, but I have not been able to successfully dig my way into Sleeping Gods, my number 9.
You should play it, Eric. I'm going to say this after all these. I agree with this one. My number 9 is Nemo's War. Now, the main reason I haven't played this is because despite what the numbers say, it is essentially a solo game. I think it says 1 to 4 players, but if you go to Board Game Geek, it says best at 1. Everyone says that. It was it's from Victory Point Games, but they came out with a really nice version of it. Z likes it, Mike likes it, all the solo players like it, and it looks like the kind of solo game that I would enjoy. I like solo games that give me some sort of sense of adventure. So this one, there's nothing really stopping me from playing it. It's in my No, it's not in my library. Because I don't have solo-only games in the library. It makes no sense to have them at a convention. But I know Z and Mike have it, so I could borrow it from them and play it. Right. So that may happen at some point. So this is a solo game I really should get to the table at some point. Nemo's War.
Number 8.
My number 8 is the first 2-player game on my list, which does happen a lot. There's a reason why those don't hit the table very often. It's Targi, which I know virtually nothing about other than it's amazing, a wonderful 2-player game. That's all I know. People talk about it being their favorite 2-player game, their favorite game period, and that sounds great. But I know virtually nothing about it. But at one of these days, I need to find a copy and and try it, because it's one of those that just keeps popping up, and I need to find out about it. Targi, number 8.
Oddly enough, this was on my list at one point for the same reason.
Yeah.
But I have since played it, and they were right, Eric.
They were right. I'm sure they're right. I just...
All right, well, this next one is another one that I think... sometimes games just go by me because other people in the Dice Tower have played them, and I haven't yet. And I just never got around to playing it. So then because other people played it, I didn't put any effort into it. And this is one of those, and that's The Fox in the Forest.
Okay.
It's a 2-player trick-taking game, which to me still sounds impossible.
And yet.
I'm sure that it's not impossible, but but again, everyone says it's great. So this is one I think might happen at some point, but I'll have to give it a whirl. The Fox in the Forest.
This didn't make my list, but it is another one that I picked up based on so many people's recommendations, but I also haven't gotten it to the table.
Number 7.
Number 7 is Dinosaur Island, another one that sits on my shelf mocking me. I've pulled it out many times. In fact, I've had this for years. I think I got it at Essen 2-3 years ago. And it's one of those that I pulled out, learned the rules. It didn't come out at game night. It wasn't my pick or something else. Some other new hotness showed up and I played that instead. And then I sort of forgot about it and then didn't remember how to play it. And then I had to go back and read the rules again. And it's just one of those cycles that it's like I look at it on the shelf and say, I need to play this. It looks wonderful. Those chunky dice are so cool. But then the cycle happens again, and I need to have a Dinosaur Island night where we're going to play this game, by gum. Number 7.
Actually, Eric, I don't think you need to at this point.
Uh-oh.
Well, I mean, you still can. It's a great game. But I think, like, when you come to Retreat, you might go out of your way to try out Dinosaur World.
Ah.
The sequel to it, and I think Dinosaur World, I like it better than Dinosaur Island.
Interesting.
So, That's possible. All right. My number 7 is a very popular cooperative game that for some reason, I mean, and I've been around the guys in the studio when they played this, like maybe 6 times, and I just have never been in the game, and that's The Grizzled. Now, the theme of this is very sobering. You're a bunch of soldiers, I think, in World War I, and things just aren't going very well. It's not necessarily about war. It's just about surviving, and you have to survive in the trenches. And I just never got around to playing it. I heard it's a tough but fairly easy to get into cooperative game. It's one of the most popular cooperative games that's out there. Has 13,000 ratings. It should have 13,001, but I have not played it. The Grizzled, my number 7.
This one I have played, and you're right. The theme is pretty sobering. It's also a very difficult game, but it's certainly worth a play. You should jump in next time they play it in the studio.
Number 6.
Number 6 is a cooperative game called Spirit Island that gets tons of praise and seems like a really neat theme with the deities on a particular island trying to drive out invading colonists, basically. It sounds really neat, and I've heard just wonderful things about it, but have never had the opportunity to jump in on a game. This might be another one to seek out in the library. I'm assuming it's in there, Tom.
Yes, and it's upgraded.
Okay.
And it's upgraded beautifully.
That's one of my favorite things when I pull out a game at the Dice Tower Library and find that you have, not only do I like the game, but now I have to hunt down all of these upgraded components that you've been so kind.
That's true. Sorry.
You really should. Do you have in the box, here's a list of all the upgrades and maybe a website link for you to order them? That would be helpful.
Not particularly, and part of the reason for that is because sometimes it's a one-time thing, or I don't remember where I got them from. I'm just always hunting down pieces. Like just the other day, I played Llama Land, and I was like, this game has potatoes as a resource. I have potatoes. Which sounds really weird to be excited about, but a long time ago,
it does.
I bought little tiny potatoes on eBay and said, someday I will use these. That day has arrived.
Anyway, my number 6, Spirit Island.
My number 6 is a game I know I'm going to like this game. I just never played it. And that's First Class. Actually, it's called First Class, All Aboard the Oriented Express. No one calls it that. The tagline is, players draft to run the most luxurious rail line and solve murders. Yet, as far from what I can tell, it has nothing to do with that. You're just drafting cars and putting these cars in front of you and doing all sorts of very Euro-y things.
There's always a murder on the Orient Express. Like
I would not ride it, frankly.
It seems like you have to have some sort of murder every time you ride that train. It seems very, very dangerous. Anyway.
I'm not arguing that. But regardless, the game itself sounds really fun. There's lots of different modules. I've heard it's almost like a Russian Railroads, the card game, from some people. And it's just one that, for some reason, I've never played. I need to get around to it. So that's First Class.
Number 5.
My number 5 used to be the number 1 game on Board Game Geek. That is Twilight Struggle. It is a 2-player simulation of the Cold War with some very interesting mechanisms that have lived on in other games that I have played. But because it's a heavy 2-player game, it is just increasingly unlikely that it's going to happen. I've had some folks offer to teach me via the app, which may be something I'm willing to do. Maybe a turn-based game on the app is the way to go. But it's just, I just can't get past I'm going to sit and stare at you for several hours playing this game with the one person. I just haven't been able to make that happen, despite the fact that I'm sure I would appreciate the design of Twilight Struggle. Number 5.
Yeah, but this one you can play against the app itself.
Well, I could do that too. Maybe I should just do that.
It's a really good app implementation and you have an iPad. I really liked it on that. I was very impressed with it.
Okay.
My number 5 is one I'm going to play because it's on my shelf of things to play with, and I think I'm going to give it a try with my kids, and that's Sword and Sorcery. So I try to play lots of dungeon crawlers. I'm getting pickier, I think, about these dungeon crawlers. Sword and Sorcery definitely looks like kind of a return to form, like a kick the door down and fight the monster style game. I'm not enamored with the font choices. It doesn't look like it's the most graphically well-designed game out there. But it does look fun, and it has some pretty high ratings. And so I really need to get around to playing this game. I don't know, it looks fun. Yeah, a cooperative, generic fantasy game. But you never know, and I need to know, because I know some people really love this one. So my number 5 is Sword and Sorcery.
Number 4.
I know there are many people that really, really love my number 4. That is War of the Ring, another heavy 2-player game that reenacts the Lord of the Rings. One player is playing the allied good players, and others are playing the forces of Sauron, the forces of evil, and it really just plays out like the 3 novels. And it's one, and I would embrace the theme and would really enjoy it. But the fact that it's, one, a pretty expensive game, especially if you're trying to track down one of those super deluxe versions, but 2, another heavy game and a 2-player heavy game just has kept me away. It's one I would love to give a whirl, though. War of the Ring, number 4.
Yeah. This one is a tougher one to get to the table. I get that, as will be, well, pretty much most of the rest of yours. All right.
Yes.
My number 4 is Star Wars Outer Rim. I know that this is the better version of Firefly. I don't know if that's really true, Eric, but everyone does say that. Yeah,
it's more streamlined for sure.
And I like the idea of being the smugglers and picking things up. And again, I don't, especially since I got a playmat for this game. I've upgraded a lot of pieces in it. So I really need to play this one at some point, because I played most other Star Wars games, including some really terrible ones. So I should probably try this one at some point. Star Wars Outer Rim.
This one is far from terrible. You should definitely give it a whirl. I missed the playmat. Maybe I just didn't know it was there when I got to play the copy in the library.
Number 3.
My number 3 is also a Star Wars game, and it's another heavy 2-player game. That's Star Wars Rebellion, where it's sort of a hide and seek, where the Rebel players are hiding the plans for the Death Star, and the Empire is trying to track them down, meanwhile raising forces all over the board. It sounds like a blast. I've got friends who swear by it being such a wonderful experience. Some people that you may have heard before say it is Star Wars on the board.
Star Wars in a box.
Star Wars in a box. I was paraphrasing. I definitely need to try it. And this may be one that's closer to happening. Just because of the theme, I think I might be able to find somebody to sit down and play this with and be able to say, yes, this is going to happen. Star Wars Rebellion, my number 3 that I need to play.
My number 3 is Pandemics. And that's because I didn't want to... Well, no, but I have not played many of the specialty Pandemics. In fact, I played the first one, which was Reign of Cthulhu, and I played the newest one, which is not StarCraft.
The Warcraft one.
The Warcraft
World of
one.
Warcraft. Yeah.
But I have not played, and I don't know that I care about Rising Tide. I heard that's the most complex one.
I like it a lot.
But, yeah, well, you like those more complex ones. But the two that I really feel like I should eventually play is Iberia and Fall of Rome.
Both are excellent.
I know what happened with Iberia because Eric went and lost that to a sleeping Jason. They stole my copy at Essen when we picked that one up, and they took it to the house that they were forced to stay at while I stayed in a nice hotel through a series of unfortunate events. But they got to play the game, and then it never came back to me.
Really?
Well,
so who took it?
No. Z had it and stuff, and I just never got around to playing it. Yeah. And then Fall of Rome sounds pretty fun, actually, compared to the other ones. And it's another one I've really made some nice upgrades to that one recently.
Yep.
I don't know what is with me upgrading games I don't play. But yeah, those are the two I'm most interested in. Rising Tide, a little less excited about that one. But I get it. They're all good.
Well, Fall of Rome, I think, is my favorite of the historical ones. And then Rising Tide, and then Iberia.
Okay. Well, either way, you have not played the Cthulhu one, right?
Yes, I played it. That's the one that I let go, though. I felt it was just a little too... It was just a little too not pandemic-y for me.
I'm curious what you would think about the Warcraft one.
Yeah.
Because that one is my current favorite of all of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've sort of avoided it. I haven't really wanted to get it. But maybe I'll give it a try. Is that one in the library, too?
Yes, sir.
My list keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's why I don't make a list.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Speaking of lists, number 2 is Twilight Imperium. Any edition, really. I think that I would enjoy this one. I just sort of hear about how long it is. Every time our local convention happens, they have these 4-hour slots, which is usually plenty of time to play just about any board game you're going to play, except they leave 2 slots for Twilight Imperium, so it has a full 8 hours plus a possible lunch break to be able to play Twilight Imperium. And that has just, it's scared me off every time. And I also hear about people who love the game, and they're like, I'm going to play it, and then they stop. Yeah, we didn't get to find out who won. We had to stop before it was over. But it sounds like one I'd really like. Twilight Imperium, my number 2.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're never going to play this game.
It's possible you're right.
We'll see, but I'm suspect of it.
Yeah.
My number 2 is number 2. It's pretty high because I think it's a game I should play, and I do want to play it, but I also think it's not likely I'll play it. I don't know. And that's PAX Premier. Now, I'm talking, obviously, of the new 2nd edition that came out a few years ago.
Yep.
Which is beautiful and looks great. And I believe it's Cole Worley who designed this. I might be wrong.
It is. Yes, indeed.
So I like his other stuff. Like, he's very well known for Root. I like Root a lot. And he also did John Company, which I enjoyed, but I'll never play it again because it's just too much for me. I don't know where this one will be. Everyone's like, I think you'll like it. I'm like, yeah, I think I might too. Who's going to teach it to me? And maybe someone will. And I don't know if I don't know. Maybe. So PAX Premier, my number 2.
Yeah. There's a few people in my game group that have been playing this. And it's one that I've never had the opportunity to sit on. And they've gotten really good at it. So I don't know if I will have an opportunity to to learn this one. But Mandy talked about this just last week, I think, here on the show. So yeah, it was actually her one and done. So it was one she did not want to play again.
Yeah, and maybe that's the way it will be for me too, but...
Yeah.
And finally, number 1.
Finally, I did mention a number of legacy games at the top, or campaign games at the top of the list, and this is one of them, Clank Legacy, which, if you recall, that year when it came out, was named, I think, as the number 1 or number 2 game from you, Tom, from Suzanne, from Mandy, and I still have yet to play it. I want to just run out and get one, but I fear that it just won't get played, despite the fact that it keeps being called such a wonderful legacy experience. And I love Clank. I've just got the expansion for Clank in Space, the video arcade one that I'm really excited to play. I love Clank, and I would probably adore Clank Legacy, but I fear that it would not hit the table with any sort of frequency, at least not right now. So that's my number 1, would love to play, but haven't, Clank Legacy.
I gotta say, man, this is such a great game. I love it so much. All right. My number 1 is Rummy Cube. It's the oldest game on my list. It is the most played game on my list. When I went through Board Game Geek to see the games that is most played, but I haven't, and when you take out some of the stuff that, like sequels and stuff, like a Munchkin and things, Rummy Cube, I sit there and like, why have I not played this? Now, I feel like if you explained the rules of it to me, I would understand them in, 5 minutes flat, because so many games are based on this game, which is 1 year younger than I am. I believe it won the Spiel des Jahres, I think. Yes,
think
it did, in
right.
1980.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know. I don't know why I haven't played this one. It's just one of those classic games that never went through my family.
Sure.
And then by the time I got to modern gaming, I was like, meh.
Nah.
So, yeah, I really should play this one. I think it was designed in Israel, if I'm remembering correctly.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
Ephraim Hertzano. I'm pretty sure Ephraim's definitely a Jewish name, I believe. So yeah, this is one of those ones I should just play at some point and talk about. So
I mean, it's I wasn't kidding. I will pack this and bring it with me to the retreat. I'm not going to promise too much. I really like the game, but I don't know if it's going to be like PAX Premier level of.
Not every game needs to be that, And I tried to have a nice cross section here. Speaking of that, folks, it's pretty important that I tried to pick games that have been out for a bit. You might say, well, how come you haven't played the newest Kickstarter yet? Well, come on now. It's right. It just came out. I'm picking games that have passed me by. I think the newest game on our list is Sleeping Gods for Eric.
Sleeping Gods, which
came out almost a year ago.
Yes, just about. That's just one that's been bugging me. That's why it hit my list so much.
All right, now the People's Choice, which I'm going to go through a little more slowly than normal because I'm going to try to guess why.
All
right, so number 20 is Orleans, and that's, I think, Tasty Minstrel going out of business doesn't help that one.
No, that's a fairly recent development, though.
Yeah, but Tasty Minstrel always had trouble keeping these games in stock, too.
I will, appreciate that. It's also not an inexpensive game with all those tokens and stuff. I think it's a higher price point.
19 is Ra, which is out of print for sure.
Yep.
I've heard rumors it's coming back. Hopefully that's true. Number 18 is Blood Rage, which is currently out of print.
And also on the higher end of expense, if I'm not mistaken, with all the minis.
Sure, and so I think that's part of it, right? Like, hey, and you're going to see a lot of games on the list that are that way.
Yeah.
17 is Scythe, which definitely falls in that category.
Sure.
16 is 1830 Railways and Robber Barons. I also don't have that on my list, but I don't want to play it, like, at all.
But this is often touted as the introductory 18XX game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is. So, Number 15 is Spirit Island, a crossover with Eric. Number 14, Micro Macro Crime City, and I'm assuming this one just because it just won the Spiel des Jahres.
It's the new hotness that some people haven't been able to get yet, yeah.
13 is the Castles of Burgundy, which I'll make a wild guess is just because everyone always says how great it is. But it's not a game that's, I think, readily like, oh, yes, I can pick up this one and understand it. Sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's also the most popular Feld game, if I'm taking a wild stab at it. So I think it's the highest ranked Feld game on this list. So people are like, I want to play a Stefan Feld game. Which one should I start with? Burgundy is usually the one that gets tossed out.
Then, oddly enough, number 12 is Caverna, and number 11 is Agricola.
How they tie? That's, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Pretty close, probably. I actually didn't look at the actual numbers on these, but, they're probably pretty close being on the list. Yep,
it's probably people who have either played one or the other, and they put the other one on the list.
Now, one thing I think that's really interesting, Eric, is I think a lot of the games, especially, I'll just mention the next one is El Grande, and then number 8, I'm sorry, next one's Caelus.
10. Yeah.
Sorry, 10 is Caelus, 9 is El Grande, and 8 is Power Grid. And these are all older classic games, and I bet a lot of people haven't played these because the people who might teach them are caught up with the new hotness.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't played Power Grid in a while, even though it's still one of my favorites. It just hasn't hit the table. There's newer games to play.
Number 7 is Pandemic Legacy. It was specifically Season 1, but again, yeah, you need to get that group together. The same reason Eric had Clank Legacy as his number 1. It's that same kind of thing. Number 6 is Concordia, another bigger-sized Euro game that a lot of people just haven't got into.
Yep.
5 is Gloomhaven. No real surprise there, right?
Sure.
People who love Gloomhaven probably already have a group they're playing it with, and if you don't have that, I don't know. I just think that it's a bigger game to get in, and it is also number 1 on Board Game Geek, so that's going to be up there.
Quick aside, my 10-year-old has been wanting to play like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and I mentioned that I've got a couple of board games that fall along those lines, and mentioned Gloomhaven as one that I had purchased to play with them, and so we were going on like a road trip, and he wanted me to bring Gloomhaven with us to the hotel for like a one-night stay. I said, nah, that's not going to happen. That's just, it's a little too much to bring with us. Anyway.
See, and that's the case where an RPG does beat.
Yes, it's a little more portable.
Does beat out the other one. Number 3 is Brass Birmingham, which again,
and number 4 is Puerto Rico.
Wow, I keep skipping games. What is it? Number 4, Puerto Rico. I think, again, that's the old classic thing.
Yep.
Number 3, Brass Birmingham. That's the new classic.
Yep.
Number 2, Twilight Imperium. For the same reason Eric said, this one's a hard one to get into. And number 1, Twilight Struggle. So Edward wins with Twilight being in the word in the top 2.
Why not Jacob?
I don't know enough about the movies to care.
I
apologize. But yeah, so anyway, that's pretty interesting. It was so interesting that I made a poll on Facebook, and I'm going to be actually making a video about this subject because I just find this to be fascinating. Like, what games are people wanting to play? Well, folks, that is it for another episode, and we're really glad to get through it because we've had a lot of internet issues during this episode, but you'll never know.
I'm not happy with my ISP right now, but we made it. We have reached the end.
Future Eric has fixed all the problems, I'm hoping.
Future Eric is going to be crying. That's all I know.
Well, we'll see. All right, folks. Well, anyhow, we'll see you next time. Our next episode that we do together, which will be 2 episodes from now, will be a more unique episode since we'll be recording it live from the Dice Tower Retreat, which is something we haven't done for a good 5+ years, I think.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done one of those sort of get it as we can get it episodes. It'll be fun.
Well, we'll catch you all on the road. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 734, was recorded on October 28th and 30th, 2021. Mandy and Suzanne are with you next week, and in 2 weeks, Tom and I report from the floor of the Dice Tower Retreat. Support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Thank you for spreading the word. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. Find out more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with production assistance from Roy Canaday, Mike DeLisio, Chris Yee, and Rob Seary. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. Baked goods for South African presidents brought to you by Mandela Scones. And hosting is provided by Game Nerds, your all-in-one solution for all your nerdy needs at GameNerds.com. We love feedback. Visit the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Email us at tom@Dicetower.com or eric@Dicetower.com, or follow us on Facebook. And of course, you can find more from the Dice Tower Network, including Tabletop Game Talk, Dukes of Dice, Board Games Insider, the D6 Generation, Solo BG, Ludology, and Dice Tower Now at DicetowerNetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. How much do you want to bet we're going to forget to record the whole week that we're there, and we have to do it like rushed at breakfast on Sunday morning?
You're acting like we've done that before. And as you do this, Eric, are you there?
I am, yes.
I'm going to make a wild guess that once again you can hear me and I can't hear you.
That is very true.
Because it says we have a poor connection. But I'm sitting on pretty fast internet here.
That's great.
Oh, now I hear you again. You're back.
I could hear you the whole time.
That's what I figured. But for some reason, you were out. It says poor connection here on my thing.
It just makes me so happy.